all to a new series about underappreciated games and systems. I'll be your host Aphex Dash. Today we'll be looking at the Sega Saturn and a few of the games that make it what it is. Why don't we start with a brief history of the Sega Saturn, shall we? The 5th generation Sega Saturn started life as Project Aura in early 1993, a top secret project by Sega's Away team comprising of 27 people from all departments of Sega. They aimed to build a machine that not only captured the needs of the Japanese, but also the United States markets. It spent 2 years in development by a dedicated team to build the system, utilising dual CPUs and an additional 6 processors. As a result, most Sega Saturn games actually needed to be written purely in the assembler language, which is essentially machine code, as opposed to the C language, which was reported as being 5 to 6 times slower on the machine. There was also a lack of a third-party development software kit, meaning that third-party developers usually only made use of one of the 2 CPUs, leaving the other CPU nearly unused. People often speculate that the 3D chip in the Sega Saturn, also called the VDP-1, was added as a direct response to Sony's PlayStation. This is actually not the truth, as the VDP-1 included in the Saturn was a direct evolution of the rendering hardware used in Sega's Arcade System 24 and System 32. The Saturn also used a lot of the other ideas found in other Sega arcade hardware, and a future arcade system called the Sega STV, which powered arcade hits like Die Hard Arcade, Radiant Silvergun, and Virtua Fighter Remix, was actually based on Saturn hardware. The Sega Saturn launched on November 22, 1994 in Japan, and its launch was a great success as 170,000 machines sold that first day alone. The system launched with a lot of great titles like anime-style RPGs and arcade ports. For the 1995 to 1997 period alone in Japan, although being outsold on console systems by the Sony PlayStation, the Sega Saturn actually sold more software, leading to the Saturn being the preferred dedicated gaming system in Japan, and the PlayStation looked upon as more of a casual gaming system. The Saturn launched on the 11th of May 1995 in the US and the 8th of July 1995 in Europe and Australia. Whilst retaining a lot of fans from the previous generation system, the Genesis in the US and the Mega Drive in Europe and Australia, the Saturn faced a tough battle. First of all, many of the launch titles in Japan were cut because Sega of America and Sega of Europe decided that certain games would not be popular in those regions. The main reason is that the then head of Sega of America, the infamous Bernie Stoller, believed that RPGs would never have any sort of success outside of Japan, which is both amusing and sad considering the current market for video games. Also, the original date for the release of the Sega Saturn actually September 2nd, 1995, but as a gamble upon hearing that the Sony PlayStation will be released at the same time, changed the release date to the 11th of May 1995, catching a lot of third-party developers off guard, meaning that not only the Saturn launched with a severely stripped-down library of Japanese translated games, it did not launch with many titles from third-party developers. Another blow for Sega is that the Saturn launched for $399 and to only selected retail outlets, gaining unpopularity with others. When the Sony PlayStation launched only 4 months later, it was released at the price of $299, $100 cheaper than the Sega Saturn. Later on, in the holiday shopping season of 1996, the Saturn was starting to show a decline in sales compared to the Sony PlayStation and the Nintendo 64. The infamous decision to disclose at the E3 of 1997 that they had started work on the successor to the Saturn made fans that owned the Saturn feel betrayed, as they had already started taking development and funding away from the Saturn. Due to this, a lot of the third-party developers started cancelling titles, only further pushing the Saturn behind the pack, and in 1998 only a few titles were released for the system, essentially ending its life. Despite all this, the Sega Saturn thrived in Japan, as the marketing was great and the system was on the forefront of gamers' minds, with a famous advertising campaign featuring a mascot, Sagata Sanshiro, a superhuman that featured the Sega Saturn and a theme song. The marketing for the Saturn outside Japan was pathetic at best.
遊びのビーチに魂込めた一人の男が今日も行くセガタ三四郎セガタ三四郎セガ Sega Saturn